What's up guys, Josh Mosman here, Motocross Action Magazine. Today we have the 2022 Husqvarna FC350. This bike is a lot of fun. It doesn't come with a whole lot of changes for the new year, but it does have one pretty good size change. That's the Brembo Clutch. So it has Brembo hydraulic actuation. It's just like the KTM. The last few years the Husqvarna models have come with Magura clutches. This year they upped it to the Brembo Clutch. It's got a little more of a pop feel, so excited to have that on this bike. It's got the same lowered suspension platform that it came with in 2021. So we're excited to get out here, do some testing on it, and bring down the details to you guys, our Motocross Action viewers, on our YouTube channel. All right guys, awesome day on the 2022 FC350. This bike is a lot of fun. If you've never ridden a 350 before, you need to know that this bike feels a lot lighter on the track. However, it's only 1 pound lighter than the Husqvarna 450. So the 350 weighs in at 222 pounds. Definitely a little bit on the heavy side for a KTM Husqvarna, but feels super light. So basically how it works is the frame, the chassis, the wheels, the swing arms, the suspension, all that are the same weight as the 250 and 450 bikes, but the engine is where you gain a little bit of weight on the 350. However, on the track, it feels super lightweight. Why is that? Well, if you think about how a top works when you spin a top on your kitchen table or like a gyroscope, when it leans over, the heavier it is, the easier it is to snap back and ride up straight. So because there's a lot less rotating mass going on inside the engine, all of that are a lot lighter on the FC350. That makes the FC350 feel a little bit lighter in the corners, and it comes out of the corners a little bit smoother than maybe a 450 would. So when you're talking about motorcycles and you're talking about motorcycle weight, a lot of it is in the engine. And FC350, super lightweight on the track, and it's super strong power-wise too. It still comes out to 54 horsepower. I think that 450 comes around 58. As for the handling on the FC350, if you guys know about the Husqvarnas from 2021, the same suspension platform is carried over from that year over to this year, the 2022 model range. So this is the first 2022 that I've put my hands on. Got the lowered suspension platform, so the forks are 10 millimeters shorter. The linkage on the shock was adjusted to lower the rear end as well, so the whole bike sits about 1 inch lower. What this does on the track, no, it doesn't make it better for beginner riders. It makes it better for all riders, beginner, novice, intermediate, pro. Everybody loves the lowered suspension platform because it's easier to turn, it's easier to dive into corners. Overall, we just love it. The MXA Wrecking Crew is a huge fan of this bike. The FC450 from Husky and the FC250 from Husky both won our 450 and 250 shootouts. So long story short, we love the lowered suspension platform. Continuing with the handling, the air forks, the WP exact air forks, these things are awesome. So as you guys might know, 2021, they got all new internals. So from the outside, the air forks look the same. On the inside, there's a lot more air bypass notches and oil bypass notches that allow the front end just to work a lot more smoothly, and it's not so harsh when you're hitting bumps. So the 2019 and the 2020 WP forks, yeah, they're pretty good. They're not bad. I thought they were good at the time, but once I jumped on the 2021 and now the 2022 forks, which are the same, dude, these things blow the 19 and 20 forks out of the water. So a lot of people ask me, should I buy a 19 or 20, or should I pay the extra money to buy a newer model? I always say, if you're gonna buy a KTM Husky gas, definitely go with the 2021 or the 2022 now, because the forks are so much better. Talking a little bit about the power plant, the FC350 is a lot like the FC250 and FC450 models. It's mellow on the bottom, it's smooth and rolls on easily off the bottom end, and it really finds the meat of the power up high in the RPM. So this FC350, it loves to rev. Is a little bit of a challenge for somebody coming from a Yamaha or a different brand that is jumping on an Austrian bike. So one thing we like to do, we added a tooth on the rear sprocket. We went up from a 51 to a 52 tooth on the rear. That made it a little bit easier to come out of the corners, a little bit easier to get into the power quickly. So the Husqvarna model range has the Brembo clutches now instead of Magura. So that changes up the lever, the master cylinder, and the clutch slave cylinder. So if you guys remember a couple years ago, Husky was having big problems with the Magura clutch slave cylinders leaking, and they were having all kinds of issues. I had issues with that when I was racing one time on a Husky, but they fixed that on the Magura models the last few years. This year, they decided, let's go all the Brembo and make the Husky clutches like the KTM. So it's still hydraulically actuated, still has the same Belleville washer spring that is super durable inside. So some people were complaining that it was a little bit harder to feel the clutch engage on the Magura, where with the Brembo, there's a lot less question marks and a lot more pop coming out of corners. Diving back into the WP suspension settings, the recommended air pressure on the forks is 155 PSI or 10.6 bar, and we really like it. I really like it personally. Pro level rider, the stock air pressure is usually something that I have to bump up a little bit, but for me, really liked it on this bike. MXA, we recommend going down a little bit for intermediate riders, for novice riders going down to maybe 10 bar, which is 145 PSI, and then our vet riders, they get all the way down to 140 PSI and even 135 PSI to make the forks a little bit softer, a little bit smoother. So if you guys have a Husqvarna at home, be sure to mess with the air forks. Always check them every day when you get to the track. Pretty much my biggest complaint with the air forks is that you have to continue to check them throughout the day. So always bleed the little air bleeders right on the outside of the fork legs, and also be sure to check the air pressure in the forks, especially if it's hot outside, as that will ramp up throughout the day. As for the shock spring, the Husky comes with a 45 Newton millimeter shock spring on the FC350. We ran the sag today at 105 millimeters. As for the rest of it, sometimes we go a little bit stiffer on the compression clickers, and we also like to go a quarter turn out on the high compression to drop down the rear end of the bike a little bit. So it starts, stock is recommended at 1 1/4 turns out. We like to go to 1 1/2 turns out on the high compression adjuster on the shock. Just like last year, the Husky comes with a map switch on the handlebars. It has map 1, map 2, traction control, and launch control. Map 1 is basically the stock traditional map. Map 2 is just a little more aggressive, so we did notice a difference between the two. Sometimes it's kind of hard to tell. Today, I was able to tell a pretty good size difference on the FC350. For the traction control, that's something that you would use maybe on a slicker track, or if you're trying to mellow out the bike a little bit. I didn't use it today, but some of our other test riders, Daryl and Ezra, were both riding it and they tried it out. So that's a cool option that you have with the Husqvarna model range, is that you come with that map switch. Since the FC350 is coming back for 2022 exactly the same as last year, we know a lot about this bike. A few things to check: the sprocket bolts. Always check the sprocket bolts. It's a very important part, very important of any model range on any dirt bike, but especially with KTMs, the sprocket bolts have been known to come loose. So be sure to keep your eye on those, especially when breaking in the bike. Also, the spokes, especially the spokes right next to the rim lock. Today, we had Ezra Lewis riding the bike, doing photos and videos this morning while the track was nice and fresh. Definitely made the rims, gave him a little bit of a hard time out there. The spokes were loose, so we had to tighten those up. Also, the airbox cover, as you know, it's a no tools airbox cover, something you take on and off without using a T-handle. Unfortunately, the Husky, the way it's designed, instead of smashing our fingers behind the plastic and pulling it off, we like to put a T-handle in there to make it a little bit simpler. So we've been giving Husky a little bit of a hard time lately, saying that their no tools airbox cover is actually a tool airbox cover, something that needs a tool to open it on and off. So that's one thing to keep an eye on. Also, the grommets inside of the airbox cover, those do fall out from time to time, so keep an eye on those. Another piece to keep your eye on with your FC350 is the spring right at the brake pedal, the rear brake pedal. So when KTM, Husky, Gas, when they give you the bike, the spring has one of its arms pointed out towards the boot. That's the one that's holding the brake pedal up. We like to turn it around, otherwise your boot will end up pushing that spring down and out, and it'll basically you'll lose the spring super easily. So that spring is broken on our test bikes before, and it's just plain fallen off before, so we like to turn that around to keep it on there. 3 more aspects to keep your eyes on is one, the shift lever. So there's a little 8mm bolt that is used to put the shift lever on. I love it. I feel like the KTM Husky model range is the easiest for putting shift levers on and off the bikes. However, it does come loose sometimes, so you got to keep your eye on that. Whenever you're braking, you're actually pushing the shift lever down and it's tugging on that 8mm bolt. So keep an eye on that so it doesn't come off. That's happened to me once in a race before, a long time as well. Also, keep your eye on the engine mount bolts. Those are Torx bolts. You gotta keep an eye on those. Those come loose sometimes. And another bolt to keep your eye on if you have an FC350 is that little bolt that goes over the countershaft sprocket cover. It connects into the clutch slave cylinder and goes through the plastic front sprocket cover, so that does come loose from time to time. Keep your eye on that as well. So overall, the Husqvarna FC350, it's a lot of fun. There's been no changes on this model from 2021, 2022. Well, I shouldn't say no changes. It did get the Brembo clutch, but no real huge structural changes. If you hop on this bike, it's gonna feel very similar to the 2021 model. So this bike retails for $10,199 at the dealers. You can pick it up now, as I've seen some people are already ordering and already buying these 2022 models. So thank you guys for tuning in to Motocross Action's test video on the FC350. As always, you can check out motocrossactionmag.com. We got lots of race results, product tests, bike tests, shootouts, videos, and more going on there. And you can subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay up to date with the latest videos, as we have lots of cool content coming there. And if you haven't seen our video on the 2022 KTM 250 SXF or our latest This Week in MXA video, click the thumbnails now.